The following program is an original production of WYCC PBS Chicago.
Tonight, same-sex marriage in Illinois. Gay couples want the right to say, "I do," but some House lawmakers are saying, "I won't." The showdown in Springfield.
The race is on, Hawaii or Illinois. The heated contest to win Barack Obama's presidential library. Which state is the frontrunner?
Plus, 7 lucky Chicago neighborhoods catch the eye of Mayor Emanuel. His $3 billion plan to dramatically improve neglected areas. What it means for the city.
And the Rosemont Cubs talks to take the baseball team to the suburbs. Some call it crazy, others say it's a grand slam. These stories and more tonight on In the Loop.
Good evening. I'm Chris Bury.
And I'm Barbara Pinto. Tonight we take a closer look at same-sex marriage in Illinois.
9 states currently allow same-sex couples to get married, but Illinois is struggling to get a law passed. The measure approved in the Senate but now stalled in the House. Speaker Mike Madigan says the measure is 12 votes short.
There are an estimated 11,000 same-sex couples in Illinois waiting to tie the knot. Some, tired of waiting for politicians in Springfield, get married in other states like New York, where same-sex marriages are now legal. Couples like Marty Gahn and Drew Dubeck.
I pronounce Marty and Drew officially and legally married.
Marty Gahn and Drew Dubeck of Chicago have been together as a couple for more than 30 years. Marty is a healthcare executive. Drew works as a consultant. Their decision to get married last year meant a destination wedding to a state where it was legal, New York.
So it was much more of a welcoming kind of environment as opposed to Illinois, which just feels to us like it's sort of a wait and see.
Illinois is one of 12 states that currently allow for civil unions of same-sex couples. 9 states have legalized same-sex marriage. Opponents of the measure currently pending in Springfield argue that civil unions already give gay and lesbian couples all of the same benefits that heterosexual couples enjoy.
Our position is that if this is an issue of rights, same-sex couples have those rights now. Now what they're trying to do is change the definition of the word marriage, which is something we oppose.
The institution of marriage has been changing throughout time, both in the legal terms and in a cultural sense.
The latest polls suggest public support for same-sex marriage is on the rise. A recent Washington Post ABC News survey shows 58% of Americans now believe it should be legal for gay and lesbian couples to marry. 36% disagree. Just a decade ago, only 37% favored same-sex marriage and 55% were opposed. Last year, same-sex marriage proponents got a big boost from the White House.
I think same-sex couples should be able to get married.
Just this week, another endorsement, this time from former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton.
I support marriage for lesbian and gay couples.
But the Catholic Church and other religious organizations remain staunchly opposed and lobbying hard in Springfield.
That, we all have genders, and gender matters in a marriage. So marriage is the union between one man and one woman, but by nature, it's just true by definition.
It's disappointing not to be supported. In fact, that the Catholic Church is actively working against what we know is a civil and a human right.
Proponents of same-sex marriage believe passage of the legislation in Springfield is no longer a question of if, but when. And some point to the economic benefits in our fiscally troubled state.
Republicans in the New York Senate realize financially this is a good thing for the state. This will bring in money to the state.
The Williams Institute estimates there are more than 11,000 same-sex couples in Illinois who would choose to get married once the measure is passed, generating more than $100 million in wedding-related spending. All of those hotel rooms, cakes, caterers, and rentals add up to a potential $8.5 million in state and local tax revenue.
When we first met 30 years ago, the idea that someday we could get married, we would have never believed it.
It was the best experience of my life.
Mine too.
Joining us now with the backstory from Springfield, Illinois, Chicago Tribune State House reporter Ray Long. Ray, it's great to have you with us.
Good to be here.
Now, we've heard Mike Madigan say that they are 12 votes shy of the 60 needed to pass this measure. At this point, what are the hurdles? Where are the sticking points?
Well, one of the big problems here is we have a whole new class of lawmakers. As you know, they redid all of the districts throughout the state of Illinois, and they all ran in separate territories. That not only put some people into areas that they were unfamiliar with, but it also brought in a whole new set of lawmakers, dozens actually, who are not ready to tackle such a tough and difficult issue. Some of them are getting a lot of pressure, obviously, from the home front. And as you know, this is a state that has a lot of different geographical areas, and it has a lot of different philosophies throughout the region.
You talked about the pushback. We saw a situation where Republican Party Chair Pat Brady had to survive a bid for his ouster because he supported same-sex marriage. For Republicans and many conservative Democrats from downstate, is this political kryptonite?
Well, it is a very big deal here. There are a lot of people throughout the state in conservative areas, Democrats, as you said, downstate, who believe that this is a moral issue and that there should not be an issue here about gay marriage. That is something that should not be allowed in Illinois. That's their position. They're not moving. There is a big effort here from groups that are pushing for this. A lot of money is coming into this. And also there are groups such as Organizing for America. This is the Obama for America offshoot group that is weighing in now and trying to help forces organize to get this passed. But there are also conservative lawmakers and conservative religious groups, both in Chicago with African American clergy and downstate and throughout the region, who are actually weighing in and trying to block this. This is the last stand, as you know, the Illinois House for this legislation. Governor Quinn has said he would sign it if indeed it makes it to his desk.
You mentioned President Obama's organization, and people there were saying they hope that stood as a reminder that the president did indeed change his position on this topic. Hillary Clinton, we saw, came out this week in support of same-sex marriage, and yet on the other side, we have the African-American clergy, we have the Catholic Church, who are kind of pooling forces on this. How much sway will those coalitions have, politicians here in Illinois?
Well, their big presence here is in Springfield, and they do have a lot of influence on legislation, and they have had that over the years. In fact, the House is tilted conservative on a lot of issues, such as abortion, but there are many efforts here that are being pushed out of Chicago, because that's where there is the center of the gravity, if you will, of this effort to try to make this change in Illinois. And so the religious groups, which have been well known and have weighed in on many issues over the years in Springfield, do have a solid lobby.
Is it beyond reason to think we won't have agreement on this, that this will not pass this year?
You know, when Speaker Madigan says they're 12 votes short, that's a pretty steep climb to make. There will have to be a lot of wheeling and dealing. There are surely some people on that list who are fence sitters. They may be convinced either through education, or they may be looking to trade a vote for some other thing, maybe in their own legislative district. But there is always going to be some wheeling and dealing on these things. Only a few years ago, some people who needed some votes for expanded casino gambling into Cook County had traded for an earlier bill that was known as the Gay Rights Bill. They traded votes back and forth, and were able to get early on legislation back in 2003 or 4 that said that people should not be discriminated against based on their sexual orientation when they're looking for housing or jobs.
You mentioned the horse trading that goes on, and politics is often, I'll give you this if you give me that. Knowing The members of the State House that you've been covering for a while, how many of these lawmakers do you think would be willing to make a deal on this issue?
Well, I doubt if there's a dozen who are prepared to just wheel and deal. There may be a dozen who could be persuaded, or at least part of them could be persuaded. A part of them may be able to put up a trade. But again, a dozen votes, if that is really the level, that is not an easy hill to climb here. It may take another election. It may take another few months. But the gap is, the bar has been marked. The sponsors say that it's not as high as 12. They say it's much closer, and they're trying to close that gap right now.
Quick time frame here. When do you think this may come up for a vote?
There's no clear indication of when this will come up as far as like in the next day or so. The legislature goes home for a 2-week break beginning next week. So it will be deep into April or May before they could come up and bring this on the House floor for a full vote.
Chicago Tribune State House reporter Ray Long, thank you for your time. The Cubs, the mayor, and Barack Obama's presidential library each got people talking this week. Here's Chris with the stories that are trending now.
One is his birthplace, the other his current home, but now President Obama must choose between Hawaii and Illinois. Where will he put his presidential library? We asked Chicagoans where they'd like to see it end up, and here's what they had to say.
Hawaii's a wonderful state. I understand it's beautiful. I have never been there because it's kind of expensive to get to, and you kind of have to save up your time and money. I think many more people would get to it if it was here in Chicago, because they'd either be changing planes or trains, or they would live in a populous city that has a very large environment around it.
I really, truly, with all of my heart, believe that it should go to Hawaii. I believe it should be there because that's where his family roots are. It's where he was born actually, and his history is there. Personally, I don't feel like Chicago is ready to have something of such great magnitude and with such historical background that's added to it, because we have so much going on in the city right now that needs to be resolved before we can bring something so positive here without rectifying the situations that are already in the city that are going on.
There's a saying that says home is not where you're from, what country, what state, what city you're from, but where the heart is. And I honestly believe that his heart is in Chicago, and therefore he should be here.
Home is where your heart is. I'm sure we have a few opinions right here at this table. Joining me tonight are Rui Kanea, who's interim editor for the Chicago Reporter, Genevieve Thiers, founder of SitterCity.com, and political consultant Peter Cunningham. Hello and welcome. Well, we thought one campaign had just ended, and it looks like another one is about to begin. And Peter, I suppose that we should make no doubt this is a campaign to bring a library one place or the other.
Absolutely. There's going to be a lot of competition for this, and I think it's a good competition, but I think it belongs in Chicago. I mean, I think the president lives here. He's got a big institution here. And people go to Hawaii to enjoy the nature and the beach and everything. They come to Chicago to get more of an experience, and a presidential library would be a great addition. It'll also be a great addition to the South Side, an economic boom. And I know we're going to talk about neighborhood revitalization a little bit later. This will be a big boom for Chicago. It belongs here.
But Genevieve, people don't come to Chicago for the weather. And Hawaii has set aside a $75 million parcel of oceanfront property in Honolulu. How do we compete with that?
Well, what I think is funny is it's oceanfront property. They better not have any windows. I mean, if you're looking out at the gorgeous beaches of Hawaii, are you going to want to be in a library? No, I mean, this is difficult. I mean, kudos to Hawaii, a wonderful pitch. But on the other hand, I mean, Organizing for Action, for example, the group that span out of the Obama for America campaign, well, they're here, and they're going to want to do think tanks. They're going to need to have access to documents. Plus, I do have to admit, I think that more traffic would come through it here. Hawaii is where Obama grew up, but this is where he chose to build his political grassroots campaign. And that's important. Frankly, it'd be great if there was something in both areas. But, you know, the thing that tipped it for me a little bit was that Organizing for Action is here, and they might need it.
Rui, if in fact the library does come to Chicago, What are the likely spots? Where are they talking about placing it?
I've heard, the University of Chicago is talking about doing something on the campus. So Michael Reese Hospital, old site there.
That's in the Bronzeville neighborhood.
Right. So those are the places, and it's kind of interesting because we are talking about this as Hawaii against Illinois, but it's really state of Hawaii against University of Chicago and some community groups over here. It's not so much the Illinois statewide effort, as of yet, anyway. So that's kind of interesting dynamic going on.
Peter, you're a political consultant. When you look at the politics here, you've got two former chief of staffs, Bill Daley and Rahm Emanuel. You've got Michelle's former chief of staff. You've got David Axelrod. Are the heavy hitters politically here in Chicago, and does that give the city a great advantage over Hawaii?
Well, I think it does. I think, as I think you know, David Axelrod's opened a political institute down at the University of Chicago, so there's a natural connection there. Cass Sunstein, a member of his administration, is down there at the University of Chicago, does a lot of work. So I just think that there's going to be a lot of the intellectual firepower around this, a lot of the political firepower. And candidly, for that library to attract people from all over the country to come and do events and things like that, Chicago is going to be a lot more convenient. On the other hand, obviously Hawaii has a lot to offer, but as you pointed out, I think the opportunity to sit inside a library in Hawaii and read the Affordable Care Act, and while the weather's at 85 degrees outside, I think it's going to be difficult. So there's no question. I think there's going to be a lot of forces aligned for Chicago. So it'll be interesting to see what Hawaii does. I mean,
it looks like the votes here are 3-0 so far.
Yeah, I just think it's going to end up here.
Is there any rule that says you can have two?
Yeah.
There isn't, but as far as I know, it's never been done. Okay. So, library or not, it looks like Chicago is going to be sprucing up its neighborhoods. The mayor has announced a plan, about $300 million in city money combined with about $2.5 billion in private money to develop 7 neighborhoods that are sometimes neglected. Rui, give us a reality check. How likely is this to actually occur? Because we've heard these ideas for a while.
I think so, but this is all down to the money. Mayor Emanuel, he's been kind of pushing that this public-private partnerships, and he sometimes gets the flack for that just because everybody hear that and basically says this is privatization of everything that which city does. So that's kind of an interesting dynamic right there. But if he can kind of pull the political muscle to get all these private folks to donate or at least to put in their money to do this, I think it sounds like a great opportunity for us. It's interesting in the sense that back when Mayor Daley was doing this, the effort was really focused on downtown, but not so much these areas that we were just talking about now. Places like in Inglewood and uptown.
Some of these ideas are interesting too. Talking about a bike path where Lakeshore Drive ends in the north, talking about urban farms in this part of the city, and talking about music areas up in Uptown. What do you think, Genevieve?
I think it's fascinating. I think it's going to happen. It's been on the docket for a while. I think Rahm's going to make it happen. The thing that I would say, though, is that there's 3 reasons somebody moves to an area. It's safe, it has good schools, and it has jobs. And I'm a big proponent of jobs. I mean, Center City's created over 1 million jobs at this point. I think it's really important. I work with the nonprofit Chicagoland Entrepreneurial Center, which has a wonderful co-working space called 1871 in the Merchandise Mart. And I'd like to see, included in the plans, 1871 is 220 small companies, all with the, capability to become the next Career Builder or Orbitz or really big, tech centers. And I think these areas should put a little money towards that. Give the companies that are now spinning out of 1871 and getting larger and larger, give them a year of free space.
But Peter, isn't the idea to get away from downtown and put some of the resources in places that don't get as much attention as downtown Chicago?
I think it's partly that. I think that there's, Rahm came in here, he's in a big hurry, he brought a bunch of companies downtown, and I think he was, not criticized, but people were pointing out, you're putting a lot of energy downtown, but our neighborhoods need help. And he's the kind of guy who, if somebody says that to him, he wakes up the next morning and calls somebody and says, let's focus on neighborhoods. I think what's interesting about the plan is that in most cases there's a big anchor involved, like this neighborhood right here in Englewood is one of them, and Kennedy King's an anchor. In Bronzeville, McCormick Place is a big anchor. Uptown, the music district, he wants to create Loyola up in Rogers Park. So those anchors are really critical to these neighborhoods, and we forget them a lot of times. And you know, you can see a lot of neighborhoods that are hurting, and I agree with you. It's got to be about jobs.
Yeah.
And you know, people need jobs in their communities. Young people need jobs. They need those entry-level jobs, and you can get that there.
Talking about anchors in communities, and of course, big anchors in communities are schools. And we're hearing today that about 50 Chicago elementary schools are going to be closed. A huge outcry from the teachers union, the president saying this is going to lead to chaos. Genevieve, your thoughts on that?
Oh, this one's hard. All I can say is that I hope that the teachers union and the school board can just keep focusing on the quality of the schools for the kids. Sometimes I think that this can get so heated, so emotional, so political that we can forget. We just need to stay focused on the kids. You know, I think of my sons. I have twin sons, twin boys, they're one. You know, schools are so critical in terms of their quality, and I just hope that that doesn't get lost, the quality of the education in the schools for the kids.
But Rui, the school board is facing a billion-dollar deficit. Does it have any real choice here but to close schools?
I suppose not, but I happen to live in South Loop, just one block south of the Jones College Prep, and they're just building, $1 million building right there as an addition. You know, so you see that, and then you see all these different schools in different neighborhoods getting closed. So like, there's some disparity there too. And also something that we should focus on is the crime. That's something that we have been suffering quite a bit in Chicago. And just moving kids just from one neighborhood to the other, that's just one big danger. And they've been talking about this for a little while. I hope they have some sort of strategy to kind of mediate that whole.
Well, the other big issue here, Peter, is that most of these schools are on the south and west sides, predominantly, if not overwhelmingly, African American. And there's a question of fairness that a lot of people are raising, a legitimate one, isn't it?
I think it is a legitimate question. I just think neighborhoods change every 20 years in Chicago, but schools are built to last 50 or 60 years. We have a lot of schools in Chicago. I used to work for Chicago Public Schools, worked with Arnie Duncan when he was the CEO, and worked with him in Washington as secretary. We have a lot of schools that some of them even go back to the 19th century, and we keep on spending money on them, and it's just not a good investment. What's happened in those communities is there has been a lot of movement out to the suburbs, some of it driven by the takedown of CHA, public housing units. And as those neighborhoods change, and the other thing is that parents in some cases are choosing different kinds of schools. A lot of these charter schools have waiting lists. Not all of them are great, but some of them are terrific. They have waiting lists, people want to go to them. So parents are active players in this decision as well.
And the school system is saying that these students are going to be moved into academically stronger. That's a big promise to make, and who knows, Genevieve, if that's going to be the reality.
They better make sure they make good on that promise. I mean, all of the things they're talking about doing for the schools that they're moving the kids to, they just have to make good on it. I mean, I understand it's a dilemma, but it's about the quality of the education for the kids, because in the end, we are our talent. It comes back to jobs and job creation and, the economy, and, we have to make sure we're spinning out good talent.
All right, we have to move on to the sports desk, which has been very active in Chicago this week. Brian Urlacher has announced he's parting ways with the Chicago Bears. He's been something of a legend for this team and the city. And any heavy hearts here about that today?
It's sad.
I'm a big believer in, loyalty and sticking with your city and everything. I thought Michael Jordan made a big mistake going to the Washington Wizards. He should have finished his career in Chicago. I think it's a shame that Urlacher doesn't finish his career in Chicago. I think I read today, 13 seasons. He's been a great guy. He's really embodied the Bears for over a decade. And it's a shame to see him go. So I think they should have worked harder to keep him.
But Rui, sports is a business, isn't it?
That's pretty much what it comes down to. I guess what he was earning a little bit before was about $8 million, and then he's offered $2 million. That's a big cut for him. I guess it was a business decision for personally, and also, obviously the Bears, they have to think about what they can do with $6 million, really.
And speaking of sports and money, we have the Wrigley Field drama, which continues to unfold like a soap opera. The mayor of Rosemont offering the Cubs, the Ricketts, the owners, to move out to play their games in the shadow of O'Hare Airport.
Well, you got to admire Rosemont, but at the same time, I mean, it's the Cubs. It's an experience. You don't go just for the game. You know, you go so that you can see the board, that you can, you know, be in the stands, be in the middle of the city in the game. And I used to live in Wrigley Field. I had to deal with the traffic. I had to deal with everything that it did to the area. I don't think it should go anywhere, even despite that.
And I don't think this is serious, because actually the mayor has said he's never actually talked to the Ricketts. But there's something bigger going on here. And as the political expert, give us a sense of what may be happening behind the scenes here in this fight between apparently the Ricketts family and the aldermen in that Wrigleyville area.
So there's a lot of politics around this. There's these rooftop owners, and they've become very organized. They have lobbyists. They donate to political candidates, and they're big supporters of Tom Tunney, the local alderman. And you know, he's not the only politician in the world who raises money and then tries to advocate for people who support him. So I wouldn't criticize him for that on the face of it. But you know, politics is definitely part of it. But this is a neighborhood institution. This is a neighborhood feel. It's one of the last ones in America. The experience of going to the Cubs is unique. I think that I think it would be a big mistake if they moved. They just need to work a little harder to help them. And
we have to stop here, but they also have to work a little harder on winning more games. I think that'll
make
this city.
That would help. It hasn't cost them fans. It's amazing.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Peter Cunningham, Genevieve Thiers, and Rudy Canea. We appreciate you coming on today. It officially became spring this week, although it didn't feel like it. And we muddled through another winter with the help of salt, a lot of it. One of the biggest manufacturers is Morton Salt, based right here in Chicago. What's their secret? Our partner WBEZ serves up the story with a dash of Curious City.
So I heard that salt was mined underneath the city of Chicago, right here underneath Lake Michigan. Is this true?
That's just beautiful and enormous and orange.
And we put it in that tall building over there, which is a hopper, and then the conveyor takes it into the bulk storage building. That's a little bit of salt. That's probably about 5,000 tons of salt. So what he's doing, the front end loader will scoop up the salt and he puts it in the hopper, and basically it's a series of screens, and it shakes the salt and separates it into different size particles. And this is one of the warehouses that we keep finished product in. So it's bagged, palletized, and shrink wrapped, and ready for the snow to fly.
Suddenly I'm a little thirsty. To find out more about Curious City, log into our website, WYCC.org, and vote on the story you are most curious about. Then check back here on In the Loop to see if your question gets answered on our program.
That's it for this week's show. You are now in the loop. The conversation continues right now on WYCC.org. I'm Chris Bury.
And I'm Barbara Pinto. We'll see you next week. Good night.